Chandrachud is the same person who writes twice a day in the sex column while filling any form. Hey CJI, you went to St. Columba School, Delhi. Can you deny the fact that you got admission there based only on your genitals? Because it's all male school. Go back to your school and ask them to become gender neutral first before preaching the country. Why would India need ISIS when we have Chandrachud and LKFC Zubair? If you're mildly familiar with Twitter, you would be familiar with this language too. But what is unusual is the frequency of such tweets and the subject, or the Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud. While it's usually just celebrities and major politicians who get this scope of engagement online, a barrage of tweets trolling the CJI have made him the top trending topic for several weeks now. So what is it that makes him the favorite of online trolls? Is there a troll army? And what is the nature and extent of this trolling? In this episode of NL Cheatsheet, we'll take you inside the unprecedented online campaign against the CJI. We'll also look at the role of politicians and digital influencers and the narratives that they try to weave. To uncover this, Newslaundry collaborated with Sheyril Agarwal and Joyojeet from the University of Michigan to analyze data from 1st of January to 20th of April. Through specific keywords, we got a data set comprising 7,53,848 tweets, of which 1,16,669 were original posts. At least 268 tweets were copy-pasted 5 times, which is an indicator of these tweets being the result of organized behavior. During the period of the study, the hashtag NotMyCJI was used 1,747 times on Twitter, hashtag Undemocratic Supreme Court 366 times, hashtag Gender Bias Laws 349 times, and hashtag Judiciary Must Apologize 256 times. We found that it was not politicians or lawyers, but digital influencers who were the major drivers of the social media discourse around the CJI. We also found that most of the highly engaged content comes from BJP-leaning digital influencers. But who are these influencers? Do they have a political bias? To understand their political positioning, we calculated a polarization score by using a formula that we came up with, based on a snapshot of their current Twitter network and their retweeting habits. As we can see here, most of the highly engaged content comes from BJP-leaning digital influencers. Let's take 3 influential accounts: Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Radha Raman Das, and Ram Prasad. In his tweets, Mitra has proposed multiple times that Justice Chandrachud is a threat to democracy. Das, who regularly spreads misinformation and communally divisive content on Twitter, uses whataboutery to attack the CJI to push a narrative of Hindu victimhood. Ram Prasad, meanwhile, is more openly aggressive and uses a tone that would arguably be unheard of in reference to public discourse over the office of the Chief Justice. He refers to the CJI as a narcissist and a clown. While these influencers don't initiate attacks against the CJI, they can be seen piggybacking on the sudden public interest and influence the discourse with their inflammatory content. But what is the nature of this inflammatory content? What are the narratives that are being enforced? The main themes of the negative discourse around the CJI were narratives portraying him as anti-Hindu and a woke feminist. Tweets attempted to expose him as anti-Hindu through direct attacks at his judgment as antithetical to Hindu values. Tweets like these often contain counterexamples and misinformation. They also use words like secular as insults. Since a number of his widely talked about judgments involve civil or human rights, one of the ways of attacking him is by presenting him as indifferent to cases where members of the Hindu community are seen as under attack. The CJI's liberal values are presented as being at odds with the common Indian, a theme that has been used extensively by men's rights activists in India for years. Several judgments in which Chandrachud was involved are seen as leaning towards a feminist interpretation of social rights, such as those on the adultery law, Sabrimala, equity in the armed forces, and sexual harassment in the workplace. During the recent same-sex hearings, statements made by the CJI triggered a new series of coordinated trolling online and a series of hashtags such as #NotMyCJI to denounce Chandrachud's feminist positions. These arguments try to dismiss woke ideas as something only the urban elite care about. But this phenomena is not just limited to trolling. There is also an attempt to discredit the CJI using three major narratives. Users listed the collegium's past appointments in an attempt to establish a pattern of bias and to accuse judges of keeping it in the family. They also highlight the role of Chandrachud's father, a former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The nepotism argument also extended to campaigns against the collegium system, accompanied by demands for government interference in the appointment process. Many of these posts mentioned Kiran Rijiju, who had criticized the collegium system until he lost the law ministry. Another angle of the collegium that sees Chandrachud criticized is on accusations of casteism in the Supreme Court. This has historically been well documented and continues to be an issue with minimal representation from marginalized groups. While the typical attacks against the CJI come from the right, the attacks on caste issues come from Twitter users with a range of political backgrounds and accounts using hashtags like Casteist Collegium and #BanCasteistCollegium to organize themselves online. Meanwhile, his international connections, such as having studied abroad, and his support of certain global liberal values are presented as being out of touch with Indian values. Chandrachud's education from Harvard University and international figures like George Soros are also used to discredit him and his decisions. The attacks here are aligned with an existing set of aggressive social media discrediting of Indians with what are seen as global liberal values, peddled by a US-based right-wing digital influencer Rajiv Malhotra. He theorizes that India is under attack from global left-leaning elites indoctrinated through major US universities, specifically Harvard. During the period of this research, we noticed 5 spikes in engagement around the CJI online. 2nd of March saw the first jump in Twitter activity related to CJI Chandrachud. This was because of the Supreme Court's ruling that day on the leader of the opposition and the CJI now being involved in the appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners. The next jump in activity was on 4th of March. Tweets centered around the CJI statement on misinformation and the influence of social media. Majority of the tweets accused CJI Chandrachud of being a hypocrite. Between 15th of March and 23rd of March, there was another spike in activity. Tweets during this period were on the Sena versus Sena hearing and the CJI's refusal to accept a sealed cover from the central government in the one rank, one pension hearing. The Maharashtra hearing in particular generated a great deal of engagement from key influencers on the side of the BJP who saw the judge as being biased towards Uddhav Thackeray. The 4th spike in tweet activity was on 5th of April. Posts were related to the CJI-led bench revoking the central government's broadcast ban on Malayalam news channel Media One. The next spike was on 18th of April, when the court began hearing the same-sex marriage case. In most of these cases, the CJI took a position antithetical either to the BJP government or to the BJP supporters. In each of these spikes, we found that digital influencers played an important role. While looking at how accounts affiliated with political parties tweeted about CJI Chandrachud, there were signs of user polarization or echo chambers suggesting the lack of exposure to cross-ideological content. The sudden spikes in activity indicate that members of the same party show coordinated patterns when they tweet about the CJI. There is also a noticeable difference in the pattern of tweeting for the governing and opposition parties. Except for one period of high activity, the graph suggests the majority of direct political engagement came from opposition accounts. In general, we notice BJP politicians were largely active only during Modi's tweet. Most of the remaining political engagement came from the opposition parties, mainly supporting judgments from CJI Chandrachud. While there was very little direct negative engagement between high-profile politicians and the CJI, online attacks against the CJI were tied to digital influencers highly polarized in favor of the BJP. These screenshots show how accounts posting pro-BJP content reacted to Modi's tweet praising the CJI on 23rd of January. They used similar style and content, quote-tweeting pieces from the mainstream media that lauded Modi's tweet. Such coordinated activity also took place later, but in criticism of the CJI. In general, from the BJP side, only lower-rung politicians or those loosely affiliated, such as IT cell volunteers, engage negatively with the CJI. Even in case of targeting by a high-profile BJP politician, the post has been worded carefully so as to avoid direct aggression. In general, opposition parties tweeting on the CJI were largely positive, perhaps also because he's seen as more confrontational towards the government and willing to push back against some of the central government's ideas. This also means that opposition parties use the CJI and his statements as a tool to attack the BJP. The avoidance of direct negative engagement with the CJI by high-profile politicians, meanwhile, was arguably less about contempt of court and more about maintaining a civil relationship with the court. For more interesting details and insights into the unprecedented online trolling of the Chief Justice of India, do subscribe to Newslaundry.com and read the full report. It is only with your support that we are able to do stories like these. And as always, pay to keep news free.
The subscription model is something that keeps Newslaundry afloat, but we need hundreds of thousands of people to completely transform the news ecosystem. So you pay for news, so it serves you. So click on the link with this video, subscribe to Newslaundry and pay to keep news free और गर्व से कहो मेरे खर्च पर आजाद है खबरें.